Namo Netraya Venu Krishnavaya Harayi Paramatmane Pranata Klesha Nashaya Govindaya Namo Namaha Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Govinda Balave Radhe Prarthay Tvamaham Sada Tudiyamiti Jana Tu Govindo Mam Tvayasa Radhe Vrindavanadishe Karunamritavahini Kripaya Nijapadabja Dasyam Mahyam Pradiyatam Angashyamili Machata Virabito Mandi Kritendi Varam Jadyam Jagu Tatpatam Varasya Shriyam Vrindaranyam Nivasanam Hridila Saddhamabhir Amodaram Radha Skandan Niveshitojala Bhujam Dhyayam Dhamodaram Hadevika Kubara Gadgadayadya Vacha Yacheni Patya Bhuvidanda Vadudavatarti Asya Prasadam Abudasya Janasya Kritava Gandharvike Tavagane Gananam Videhi Gandharvike Nijagane Gananam Videhi Brindai Tulsi Debai Priyai Keshavasya Cha Krishna Bhakti Prade Devi Satyavachai Namo Namaha Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. First of all, I'm offering my unlimited Dandavat Pranams and my Shraddha Pushpanjali at the lotus feet of my most beloved worshipable Gurudev Nitya Lila Pravishta. Om Vishnu Pad Paramahansa Saraswata Sri Srila A.C. Bhakti Vedanta Swami Maharaj Srila Prabhupada. And then I'm offering my same unlimited Dandavat Pranams and my Shraddha Pushpanjali at the lotus feet of my most worshipable beloved Siksha Gurudevs Nitya Lila Pravishta Om Vishnu Pad Paramahansa Asto Tarasata Sri Srila Bhakti Rakshak Sridhar Goswami Maharaj and Nitya Lila Pravishta Om Vishnu Pad Paramahansa Astottara Sata Sri Srila Bhakti Vedanta Narayan Goswami Maharaj. And my Dandavat Pranams to all of my Sri Rupa Nuga Guru Varga. And my Dandavat Pranams to all the Vaishnavas and all the Vaishnavis. So, Srila Prabhupada Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur has made some very powerful statements in the beginning of his commentary, Anuvritti commentary. And before we move on, his commentary of this first verse still. This will be the last one that we'll be reading on the first shloka. We've already read Srila Prabhupada's, Sri Radharaman Das Goswami, Srila Bhakti Vinod Thakur, and now Srila Prabhupada Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur. So, actually have to go to the previous page because it's a long paragraph, but I'm going to read it. In the Sri Upadeshamrita, two kinds of instruction are given. The first is to give up the things that are unfavorable to bhakti, and the second is to adopt things that are favorable to bhakti. As long as the sadhak fails to apply these two kinds of instructions in his life, there is no possibility that what will manifest in his heart? No? No. You're on the right track,
Agreed.
but not quite. There is no possibility that bhav bhakti will manifest in his heart. Now this is essential to understand, because in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, Srila Rupa Goswami is clearly defining what is sadhana bhakti, what is bhav bhakti, what is prem bhakti. And he's also going to be stating that the reason why Rupa Goswami has written this is to immerse everyone in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. That is the thesis. That's why Prabhupada gave that summary study in the very beginning in the form of Nectar of Devotion. So that is our Shastra. Yes, so when we understand the meaning of this, that as long as a sadhak fails to apply these two kinds of instruction in his life, then there is no possibility that bhav bhakti will manifest in his heart. And then he says, what to speak of prem bhakti. So the bhav bhakti is the first achievement of the sadhak, where there is promotion. There's promotion each level of the way between Shraddha and... But really, there are three main divisions: sadhana bhakti, bhav bhakti, prem bhakti. The definition of a sadhak, we'll be covering that in the course of our classes on Upadeshamrita. The sadhak is trying to bring about this manifestation of bhav. This is the aim of sadhana. This is the aim of sadhana bhakti. Otherwise, it's not actually considered to be true sadhana bhakti, unless someone has this aim of arousing within the heart this manifestation of bhav. Here at the bottom there's a small footnote, just to review for ourselves. In the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu 131, bhav is defined as follows. Now this is the actual definition given by Rupa Goswami. Only the English is here, not the Sanskrit. Bhava bhakti is a special manifestation of the potency of unalloyed goodness. What is the term in Sanskrit for unalloyed goodness?
Shuddha sattva.
Yes, Shuddha sattva. That is the first words in this verse. Shuddha sattva visheshatma prema sura. That if somebody believes in something, has faith in something. No. Shraddha is actually the last fraction. This is how Gurudev defined it. I don't know if you were present. We went over this a little bit in previous classes some time back. But it is actually the last fraction Like if you break down the particle of prema, right? So Shraddha is actually the last possible, tiniest little fragment of prema. Huh? Oh, Haribol, 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 Haribol. Yeah, that's good. But there's some ring. Hare Krishna, Haribol. So, here, the definition verse of Bhav is a very exciting definition because it's telling us what's in store for us, what will be coming and happening to us, we jivas. Here it is. Bhav is a special manifestation of the potency of unalloyed goodness, Shuddha Sattva. In other words, the constitutional characteristic of Bhav Bhakti is that it is a phenomenon entirely constituted of Shuddha Sattva. It is like a ray of the sun of prema, and it softens the heart by various tastes, ruchi. This is the definition given by Rupa Goswami. Shuddha Sattva Visheshatma Prema Surya Amshu Samya Bhak. So that second line is telling Prema Surya, which means the son of prema. Prema Surya Amshu. And Amshu here is being referred to as Kiran, which means like a ray. Kiran, a ray of prema. So this manifestation takes place in the stage of Bhav, that this Shuddha Sattva Visheshatma, Gurudev defined Visheshatma as a particular phenomena which is directly coming down from the eternal spiritual world, and it is originating from the hearts of the eternal associates, from their hearts, their powerful praying, which the devotee in this world is aspiring toward particular rasa of Krishna, right? That's developed. It's developed through the stages of ruchi and asakti. And now the devotee is getting glimpses of his internal transcendental siddhadeha, his spiritual body, his spiritual form. Right? He's getting glimpses. Those glimpses are called what? Spurtis. So, gradually, Bhakti Devi is preparing the heart of the sadhak to receive this powerful, direct manifestation of Shuddha Sattva from the spiritual world. And when that manifests in the devotee's heart, when it shines down into the devotee's heart, then what happens? Ruchi bis chitta, mashrinya. Mashrinya means melting. These tastes, there's 3 different types. That's all analyzed in the explanation of this verse. We can read that in the Bhakti-rasamrita Sindhu Bindu. But there are 3 main types of tastes, and they are aspirations that the devotee has. And these ruchis melt the heart. Ruchi bis chitta. Chitta means the heart, the consciousness. And ruchi bis chitta, mashrinya. They melt the heart. And that's why in that stage of bhav, there is no more connection and identification with the material body and the subtle body. That stage is the perfectional stage. It's called siddha. Siddha. Now they've attained perfection in that stage. So that's why in that stage, the sadhak is no longer referred to as a sadhak. He's called Siddha now. And he is in the stage of Uttama Bhakti. He's a Uttam Adhikari. He's no longer in the stage of practicing. Now he has attained, but Rupa Goswami has told that there is yet so much more. This is only the beginning of the attainment. And then in that stage of the Uttam Vaishnava, in the stage of Siddha, now his goal has become only exclusively to attain prema. Although it's also referred to as the beginning stages of prema, but Rupa Goswami has divided it yet into a separate category. Sadhana Bhakti, Bhav Bhakti, Prema Bhakti. See? So this is all very elaborately, beautifully described in this Madhurya Kadambini, which we're also going to get to at some point. You see? So, did you have some comment or anything? Yeah.
No, actually, you answered it. I did have a question, and it was answered.
Mm-hmm.
I have a question.
Yeah.
From Bhav to Prem, does it take different amounts of time for the different devotees to go from Bhav to Prem?
By the will of Krishna. Yeah. It can be, generally, according to Madhurya Kadambini, according to what Gurudev is told, is that in that very same body in which he has attained this stage, he will deepen, it will intensify and intensify. That's why in that stage, they have no consideration at all of whether they're laughing or crying or rolling on the ground. They don't care. There are verses, that verse that we read at the end of Bhaktivinoda Thakur's was explaining that. Yeah? So what Gurudev has explained is that when that deepens and it is approaching the stage of actual darshan of Krishna, direct darshan of Krishna, that's Gurudev said, prema cannot come while we are still yet in this body. The body has to be a transcendental body because the material body cannot tolerate prema. It will be just, I use the term, ripped apart. It can't hold it. So what Gurudev said is that at the end of the Madhurya Kadambini, where it's being described, where the devotee is receiving the darshan of Krishna, he's first of all, Krishna is telling the devotee, now please, my dear devotee, now please experience my fragrance of my thoughts, hearing, eyes, see. They become inundated, one by one by one. Now experience this, now experience it, and each time the devotee faints, completely faints. So this experience, Srila Gurudev has explained, and it's in his commentary on Madhurya Kadambini, that this is just prior to the stage of prema. Just prior. You're making it louder again?
Yeah, but I'm sorry, it seems like somebody moved it here that I cannot really hear in the kitchen.
Haribol?
I'm just trying to make...
Yeah, it has that. Hare Krishna, Haribol, Bol, 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 Haribol, Haribol. No, it's lower.
Yeah.
Haribol. What about that other little speaker that you just plug in and bring it out into the kitchen?
Yeah.
Isn't that better?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, we don't have that here?
Yeah, it is. I was just being lazy to be honest.
Oh.
No, I'm not.
Okay.
I just put it in.
Yeah. Hare Krishna. So, what was that last point?
Sorry, Maharaj.
Yeah.
About prema,
Yeah. Gurudev said, at that point, then what happens? for the devotee. Now there's a big echo. Hare Krishna, Hare Bol.
You can turn that one down now.
Hare Bol, Hare Bol, Hare Bol. Okay, that's good. So what arrangement is there is that Yoga Maya now steps in. Well, Yoga Maya is there all throughout. But particularly at this point, where the devotee is about to enter the stage of actual praying, Yoga Maya arranges for him to leave this body and transports him directly to the universe, where Krishna is now performing his leelas, and there that devotee attains his what do we call it again? Vastu Siddhi. Yes. Vastu Siddhi means his eternal spiritual form. And he has the abhiman that he is the son of such and such, mother and father, has taken birth in Braj. In our case, that would be she. And in that stage now, for the first time, Prabhupada actually even says this in the Krishna book. He says that this is the first time that the jiva sees Krishna. But now he has his eternal spiritual form. And now the jiva is being trained in the realm of praying, which now progresses stage by stage by stage. Intensifying, deepening. So like, in the Krishna book, in 10th canto, it's explained that there were these groups of gopis who wanted to have Krishna as their husband, and they were small gopis. And they wanted to perform a vrat, a vow, called Katyayani vrat. They performed that. But what was their history of their previous lives? They actually were sadhana siddhas. They had attained, through the performance of sadhana, this opportunity to take birth as gopis. You see? So, so back to our topic. As long as the sadhaka fails to apply these two kinds of instruction in his life, then there is no possibility that Bhav Bhakti will manifest in his heart, what to speak of praying. This is to us, the Sukhadesha Amrita, and the process of Sharanagati. Sharanagati is synonymous with this first verse. The first sloka means Sharanagati. Can't enter into bhakti without Sharanagati. Various types of fabricated views. Now there's a whole long list here, what these persons adhere to. They adhere to various types of fabricated views, to doctrines that display only an external veneer of religion, but actually are opposed to bhakti, or to ideas that are contrary to the Vedas, to opportunistic views, and to the doctrines of imitationism, sahajya, impersonalism, mayavad, and other diverse and contrary opinions. So all such persons, they fear these instructions given in the form of this Upadeshamrita, considering them to be the personification of Yamaraj, who administers punishment to the deceased. They fear. But faithful persons who study and recite this Upadeshamrita with great love, and they apply it in their lives, they will become free from all kinds of doubt in regard to bhakti, and they will easily attain first bhakti, and finally the most rare prem bhakti. So therefore, holding the dust of the lotus feet of the Gurus following in the line of Sri Rupa Goswami upon my head, this Sri Varsabhanavi Doyatava, the servant of the Lord of the Life, the Prananath of Vrishabhanu Nandini Srimati Radhika, is setting down this commentary of Sri Upadeshamrita named Anuvriti. The purpose of doing so is to immerse the jivas in Sri Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, which was revealed by Sri Rupa Goswami and which was practiced and preached by the Vaishnava preceptors who follow Sri Rupanuga Vaishnava Acharyas, such as Sri Gaur Kishore Das Babaji and Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur. Now, we're continuing from where we left off yesterday. That was worthwhile reviewing that paragraph. There are three kinds of overwhelming passions observed in worldly living entities who are attached to material sense enjoyment. Three kinds of overwhelming passions observed in worldly living entities, that means Badha Jivas, who are attached to material sense enjoyment. What are they? The urges of the speech, the urges of the mind, and the urges of the body. When one falls into the powerful current of these three impetuous demands, it is very difficult to gain deliverance. When one falls into this current of these impetuous demands, it is very difficult to gain deliverance. Falling into the stream of repeated birth and death, such living entities are deprived of their spiritual well-being. But self-controlled persons who tolerate these demands are not overwhelmed by material sense enjoyment. They are competent to vanquish this material world. Pretty good. Huh? They become competent to vanquish this material world. Now, the demands of speech refer to the speculations of the followers of impersonalism, that is the Nirvishesh Vadis. This is in this category of the demands of speech. And to the logical deliberations of the result-oriented workers ensnared in material activities, which stress the fruits of action. Who are they? Yeah, they're karmis. Yeah? They are the result-oriented. Of their logical deliberations, result-oriented workers, ensnared in material activities, which stress the fruits of action. Then the next item, where the demands of speech are referring to. And to all talk not related to the service of Sri Krishna, but related to varieties of desire for material enjoyment. So those are three different categories that he's calling these vachovega, the demands of the speech. So he says, the demands of speech do not refer to those words that apply to the service of the Lord. On the contrary, such talks should be considered as the fruit of tolerating the demands of speech. Sometimes, although one adopts a vow of silence, he expresses his desires for material enjoyment, and so on, simply by his bearing, or by writing. I am not speaking, I am writing. So these are also included within the demands of speech. Now comes the agitations of the mind. The agitations of the mind are of two types. One, avirodha priti. That means, you know what priti means? It means love, affection, attachment. So avirodha priti means unimpeded attachment. Like means all out attachment, unimpeded. The second type, agitations of the mind, is called virodha yukta krodha. That means the anger arising from impediments. So attachment for the faith of the Mayavadis, now here's his list, what different items are in these categories. Attachment for the faith of the Mayavadis. Veneration towards the adherence to result-oriented activity. And belief in the ideas of those who have many desires not related to the service of Krishna. These are three kinds of avirodha priti, the first category. Three different types of avirodha priti, meaning unimpeded attachment. Again, attachment for the faith of the Mayavadis, veneration toward the adherence to result-oriented activity, and belief in the ideas of those who have many desires not related to the service of Krishna. These are the three kinds of avirodha priti. He goes on and says, mere indifference to the activities of the jnanis, the karmis, and the persons possessing other desires is but the unmanifested or the undeveloped stage of unimpeded attachment. So, what is he saying? So someone may be indifferent, right? But that indifference is not enough. Because that is the unmanifested or the undeveloped stage of this avirodha priti, this unimpeded attachment. So indifference is just another form of gradual. When one fails to obtain the cherished fruit of one's work, and when, in spite of all endeavor, one does not obtain liberation, mukti, then what comes? Krodha, anger. Yes. Yes. Let's read that one again. When there is an impediment to the fulfillment of material desires, anger arises, right? When one fails to obtain the cherished fruit of one's work, then anger comes about. And when in spite of all endeavor, one does not obtain liberation, mukti, anger comes. To meditate upon the pastimes of Sri Krishna is not a form of mental agitation. Rather, it is the means by which all mental agitation becomes pacified. Jai Shri Krishna Lila Ki Jai. So, now the third category of the conditioned souls, the demands of the body, are also of three types. First one is the urges of the tongue, belly, and genitals. Anxiousness to relish any of the 6 kinds of taste, and greed to enjoy animal flesh, fish, eggs, wine, excessive ghee, milk, rubbery. You know what rubbery is? Very condensed milk sweet. Cream, and so on, is known as the impetuosity of the tongue.
All my favorites.
All your favorite? No, all your favorite.
No,
Many
That's not the right thing to say.
last mention. Just the last mention.
Yeah, the last mention, of course.
It's automatically in here because rubbery is very sweet. Okay? So, the demands of the body are 3 types: urges of the tongue, belly, and genitals. So now he's telling here that anxiousness to relish any of the 6 kinds of taste, and the greed to enjoy, again, I'm reading, animal flesh, fish, eggs, wine. So those 4, we don't have anything to do with that, do we? Right? Okay. That's why I was saying you cannot put all of these into that category.
No. My mind was only on the good stuff.
Yes, okay. So, now comes excessive ghee, milk, rubbery, cream, and so on, is known as the impetuosity of the tongue. Sadhus also avoid eating foods that are overly bitter or spiced with hot chili. Consumption of betel nut, the mixture of betel with various spices, called panwala. Now, next, consumption of betel nut, mixture of betel with various spices, cigarettes, marijuana, hemp, opium, and other intoxicating substances, as well as onions and garlic, are also counted as impetuous demands of the tongue. What are they counted as? Impetuous demands of the tongue. Yes. By honoring it with great... Wait. I skipped ahead. Okay, here it is. Sadhakas of bhakti must never indulge in these intoxicants. Who should not indulge? Sadhakas never indulge in these intoxicants. One should very carefully save oneself from the vehemence of the tongue by doing what?
Chanting.
Honoring the food remnants, the Mahaprasad of Bhagavan and his devotees.
Even if it's Maha-rubbery.
Yes. Although Mahaprasad, now this is our saving sentence here. Here's where we get saved. Are you ready to be saved?
Yeah.
Okay. Although Mahaprasad may be very tasteful, it is not included within the demands of the tongue. Gaur Premanandi.
What's a different purport then? If we're eating prasadam for the taste of it, then that's sense gratification.
Yeah, but that's a different discussion, a different aspect of this discussion. What's being told here is even if those items are there, that because in Prabhupada's purport he didn't get into the rubbery and the cream and the excessive ghee, right? But Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati is. So Prabhupada is writing for his particular audience, right? And he does not want to discourage whatsoever his devotee population of his disciples from eating sumptuous, extremely rich, and very, very tasteful Mahaprasadam. Right?
Correct.
Yes. However, as one advances, that will also have to gradually come under control. Okay? Let's go on and see what else that Prabhupada Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati has to say. He says, although Mahaprasad may be very tasteful, it is not included within the demands of the tongue. By honoring it with great faith,
That's the key.
yes, by honoring it with great faith, one can conquer the demands of the tongue. But if, on the pretext of accepting prasad, one desires one's own enjoyment and cunningly relishes its taste, that is also included as the passion of the tongue. Read that one again. But if on the pretext of accepting prasad, one desires one's own enjoyment and cunningly relishes its taste, that is also included as the passion of the tongue. To eat very costly and delicious food items such as rabri and cream offered to the demigods, the devatas, at the houses of wealthy persons is detrimental for renounced Vaishnavas, Niskinchan Vaishnavas. In order to satisfy the lust of the tongue, one may become ensnared in various types of reprehensible behavior and bad association. So, in India, especially in that culture, like when Prabhupada first came back to India, you study the history of the devotees who have written the books, and you'll hear that practically every day Srila Prabhupada was being invited along with his entire group of 25, 30 disciples to eat at all these wealthy persons' homes. What was Prabhupada doing by doing this?
Engaging them in service.
Yes, he was launching his movement in India. And in order to do that, he had to get a foothold with that class of persons, especially the big industrialist business magnates who are very wealthy. Prabhupada was in business before. So he had many, many, many contacts. And he went from town, city to town, all over India for the first year with his dancing white elephants, right? Yeah.
Everybody, Nandan and Giriraj Maharaj told me that his scheme was he got all the most wealthy people to become life members.
Yes.
And then they would go and they say, the Tattas and the Birlas, they all become life members. And everybody else would become life members.
That's
so
right.
Prabhupada did that first.
Yeah.
And then it was easy for them to go out and get life members.
That's right. Didn't we also do that in the West? You see this book, my dear sir? Look, whose signature is there? George Harrison. So, I've heard, if you've read these different books of Guru Das and who else? Yamuna and Shyam Sundar's second volume. I haven't read yet. You were supposed to bring it from your storage. That's telling about the India thing after England. Yeah, right. So, I've heard it many, many times that, and I've seen it as well, because when we came in like 75, I stayed for 3 months, and then in 77, I stayed an entire year. And, these various disciples like Gargamuni and others, who had helped Prabhupada to spearhead, they got into a certain kind of mode at that point in time where they had been going to these wealthy persons' houses and they were fattening up like anything, and but Srila Prabhupada coming along with him, even if those persons had not prepared the prasadam completely 100% without onions or garlic or something. Prabhupada instructed his disciple, don't say anything, just take. Because this is for preaching, that very, very, sensitive relationship, right? Because what Prabhupada told about how you have to be very careful with dealing with these life members, such personalities. They will give so much support and they will help, by developing relationship with them, you see. It's all based on relationship. And even amongst and even in the West, all the big elitists, all on relationships. Who do you know, right? You can't come to the higher echelons unless you know someone. You have to have the ins, right? But there, Prabhupada said that you have to be very careful with these kind of persons as well, to not cause a rift in that relationship. He says, because these Indian gentlemen, they're like a fine piece of china that you keep in your china cabinet, right? They're very delicate and beautiful. But if that gets broken somehow, okay, you can glue it back together, but it will never be the same, he said. So he said, be very careful. Don't transgress in that relationship whatsoever, because then it can never be mended, can never be brought back. So in this way, Prabhupada, he understood exactly how to, carry out his master plan of implanting his movement, importing back into India Western Vaishnavas and completely blowing the minds of the Indian people when they see 30 devotees, white-skinned, dancing white elephants with Prabhupada, It was such a phenomenon at that time, such a phenomenon. I got to experience the same thing, not with Prabhupada, but when we ended up in Bangladesh in 1977, where we had gone to get new visas because our 30-day landing pass was finished and we wanted to stay in India. So there was like 4 of us. We all came there separately to the capital of Bangladesh called Dhaka. Tremendous wars, the East and West Pakistan wars in which so many Hindus were just slaughtered and murdered. And that's when there was like something like 2 million Hindus came across the border into India to save their lives. Because as soon as they saw them, they were just, you're dead. The Hindus. So we were there, 4 Westerners, and we got stuck there. That's a whole story about applying for our visa, and we applied for the wrong visa. And they told us, no, you can't get this visa except from the High Commissioner, and he's out of station. You'll have to wait until he comes back. So it ended up we had to wait 2 whole months. But during that time, Sri Krishna had a plan. People saw us walking around in Dhaka. And then one day a man came in where we were doing our sadhana in the morning time. We were actually living in a Radha Govinda temple. It was one of the only temples that had deities still existing. Because all the Muslims, they just broke all the deities and destroyed the temples.
Is it a Gaudiya Math temple?
No, but there was a Gaudiya Math temple there, but they didn't have deities. The temple was there, not the full, it was a little, also partially destroyed. This was just some random temple called the Radha Govinda temple. They had brass Radha Govinda deities, and they had Panchatattva deities that were told to be a couple hundred years old, which were quite tall. So, and they looked very unique, Panchatattva deities. So somehow we found out about this place, and that's where we stayed the whole time. But then what happened was, people started to come, and with very great respect, they would bow down and sit up, and they didn't speak English in this first person who came. So we had one of the brahmacharis spoke a bit of Bengali, and anyway, this man had come to invite us to come to his village. And at that time, Bangladesh was only 10% Hindu. Prior to that, before the war, there was a couple million more Hindus. But now, the only ones left were like 10%, and they were kind of like secluded into different villages, Hindu villages, which were almost all Hindu. So they started to invite us to come there. And we went, and they brought us on, they came the next day, brought us on the train to their village. We got off at the train station, and they had a marching band waiting for us. They had 4 rickshaws, one for each of us. They had a big, huge kirtan party leading us from the train station into the village. And then they gave us a place to stay, and the hundreds of people came and were just staring at us. And they were just awestruck. Because a lot of them hadn't even seen Westerners before. We had blue eyes, and they were looking, and they... we had a program in the evening that was a big kirtan festival that they had already arranged, and it had this gigantic circular shaped tent with hundreds of people inside. And it was shaped round, and in the middle was this platform. And on the platform was tulsis. And so in Bangladesh, this culture continues to this day, where they have hundreds of different kirtan groups from different villages and so forth. It's part of their culture, And so they invited us to come. And when we came through they had some aisles, coming into the center. And when we came, the people were just awestruck. And then we came right to the center, and we decided, let's do the Tulsi song and do Tulsi Parikrama and then chant Hare Krishna,
It's Bengali.
Yeah, and so we started doing that, and the audience exploded. They just yelling, Haribol, Haribol. They were just going nuts, And at the end of that, then we chanted Hare Krishna, and they were also chanting, and But at the final, when our kirtan was finished, hundreds of people, it was mind blowing. Then we somehow or other got back to our place where we were staying. It was a village house, and it was surrounded by people. Until 10 o'clock at night in the dark, and we were there for a few days, and we had brought a whole trunk load of books. Somehow or other, we had these books shipped from Mayapur, and they were all instantaneously distributed. And then what happened was Jayapataka Maharaj heard about what we were doing. It was the very first time. We weren't the first devotees to go. Garga Muni went just before that war. But then since that time, no one had gone. So we were the first ones to open up Bangladesh. And then Jayapataka came himself, and that was a major, major hit, because he spoke fluent Bengali, And we went to one village named Maiman Singh, and I remember that village, a few thousand people came from other outlying villages. And the people even said in their oral history, that's the biggest crowd they ever had in their village before. And he said, they gave him an elevated seat, and he spoke in Bengali, blew their minds. So he stayed for a couple of weeks, 2-3 weeks. We went to a couple other villages. But that was the beginning. I forget the tangent where this connected to what we were talking about.
Honoring prasad that might be very rich.
Right.
Srila Prabhupada was making a concession.
Yeah.
And
That was also
Going to the rich people's houses.
going to the rich people's homes. And anyway, you know, the main thing was how the people were so impressed by Westerners. And then I was telling my experience in that regard. So, anyway, Srila Prabhupada goes on, Bhaktisiddhanta Prabhupada. He said, in order to satisfy the lust of the tongue, then one may become ensnared in various types of reprehensible behavior and bad association. So now he quotes the verse from Antya Leela of Chaitanya Charitamrita, where Chaitanya Mahaprabhu speaks directly to Raghunath Das Goswami. And Raghunath Das Goswami, he wanted to hear directly, because everything he heard from Swarup Damodar Goswami, everything was directly from Swarup Damodar. But he, on one occasion, he requested through Swarup Damodar, and then Mahaprabhu spoke. He spoke these words. There's more, but this is like the first verse. He says, Jivvara lalase jay uti iti uti dhai. So, jivar means the tongue. Lalase means greed of the tongue. Jay iti uti dhai. Shishno dhara parayana Krishna nahi pai. Bhalona kaiboar bhalona porive. So he's told here, those persons who are prone to carnal pleasure and eating too much, and who run here and there to satisfy the greed of the tongue, they never obtain Sri Krishna. Krishna nahi pai. They cannot attain Krishna. Then he says, Bhalo na kaibe ar, bhalo na paribe. So the word bhalo means good quality, very good. Bhalo na kaibe ar. So that means one should not eat too much delicious food. And bhalo na paribe. Paribe means to wear clothing. So one should not wear elegant and expensive clothes, nor should one eat delicious food. So Prabhupada is explaining, sadhakas should very carefully avoid these things. Gluttonous persons usually suffer from different types of diseases. These ensue. Persons who eat excessively, they generally become subservient to the demands of the genitals, and thus they become debauchees. By accepting Bhagavat Prasad in a suitable manner, by observing Ekadasi in accordance with the regulations, and by serving Krishna, the demands of the belly are mitigated. Then he says that the demands of the genitals are of two types. In accordance with Scripture and not sanctioned by Scripture. When a person who has attained maturity marries in accordance with scriptural regulations and observes the prescribed dharma for a householder, a grihastha, by following the proper behavioral codes for begetting good progeny, he regulates the demand of the genitals. This is classified as sex indulgence in accordance with Scripture. There are many different types of illicit sexual indulgence, such as transgressing scriptural and social codes, and accepting another man's wife, lusting after 8 types of conjugal exchanges, and enjoying the senses by artificial and licentious means contrary to scriptural codes. Both householders and renunciate who are sadhakas of bhakti should always remain aloof from the demands of the tongue, belly, and genitals. So now, in getting to the end of his Katha commentary on this verse, he's quoting the famous book, Prema Vivarta. Have you heard about that book before? Who's the author?
Jagadananda Pandit?
Yes. In Jaiva Dharma, it's explained, mentioned quite a number of times. So, in that book, Prema Vivarta, the associate of Sri Chaitanya Dev, Sri Jagadananda Pandit has said, and there are 4 verses that are being quoted here. And these are very, very pertinent, the way that he's expressing. He says, Vairagi Bai, Gramya Katha Nashu Nive Kani, Gramya Varta Na Kohive Jabe Milibe Ani. So this means, Vairagi Bai means my dear brother mendicant, my Vaishnava mendicant, oh brother. Vairagi means sannyasi or renunciate. O Vaishnava mendicant, O brother, whomever you should meet, do not hear from him nor speak with him about mundane subjects. What is that termed as?
Gramya Katha.
Gramya Katha. Why is it called Gramya Katha?
Village gossip.
Yes, because a village is called Gram. And Gramya Katha means ordinary, mundane, gossiping talk that goes on in the villages, right? So, Nashuni Bekani, don't hear this. And then he said, Gramya Varta, Na Kohive Jabe Milibe Ani. Do not, he said, and do not speak with him about mundane subjects. Swapne ona karo bhai stri sambhashana grihe stri chadya bhai asyacho vana. He says, do not speak intimately with a woman even in your dreams. Oh brother, huh?
Swapna.
Yeah, in your dreams. Oh brother, here it says, Grihe Stri Chadya by Asyachovan. Oh brother, you should give up your wife and household and retire to the forest. Now we don't tell that, like, in our community, because this is a Grihastha community. And they're in the proper stages, right? But when someone really understands, like our Gurudev, such an elevated personality, no one can imitate that. He learns. So, but here Jagadananda Pandit is telling us, oh brother, you should give up your wife and household and retire to the forest. If you wish to develop love for the lotus feet of Sri Sachinandana Gaur Hari, Jadi Chaha Pranay Rakite Gaurangera Sane. If you wish to develop this love for the lotus feet of Sachinandana Gaur Hari, then Chota Hari Daser Katha Take Jaina Mani. You get the meaning?
Always remember the pastime of Chota Haridas.
Yes, always remember. Bhalona Kaibavar Bhalona Paribe Pridaite Radha Krishna Sarvada Sevibe. If you desire Bhagavad Bhakti, then you should not eat delicious food, nor dress yourself very luxuriously. In this way, you should always serve Sri Radha Krishna within your heart. So then Prabhupada says, only one who is fully able to tolerate the 6 urges of the body, mind, and words that have already been described, is fit to be addressed by the title of Goswami, or one who is the master of his senses. Such Goswamis are the true servants of Sri Krishna. Those who, on the contrary, are controlled by these 6 demands should be called Godasa, servant or slave of the senses, and not Goswami. I'm just finishing, this is the very end. And not Goswami. They should be called Godasa. Those who are Godasa, servants of the senses, they are actually servants of the illusory energy, Maya. And that's why they're also called Maya Das. If therefore they desire to become servants of Krishna, then they should follow in the footsteps of those who are truly Goswamis. There is no means other than this. Those whose senses are not controlled can never become devotees of Sri Hari. In Srimad Bhagavatam 7.530, Sri Prahlad Maharaj has said, Matirna Krishne Paratak Svatova Mito Bipadyeta Griha Vratanam Adanta Gobir Vishatam Tamishram Punak Punak Charvita Charvananam. O Father, best of the demons, materialistic persons are simply milling over that which has already been milled and chewing that which has already been chewed. Because their senses are not controlled, they are proceeding towards the dreadful hell of this material existence, repeatedly trying to enjoy that which has already been consumed. The intelligence of such materially attached persons cannot be turned towards Bhagavan, Sri Krishna, either by their own endeavor, by the instruction of others, or by the association of similar materialistic persons. So this ends the purport on the first verse of Srila Prabhupada Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. And tomorrow we will begin the purports of the three acharyas for the second shloka. And that will go on for some time. You know why? Because we actually have 5 different commentaries to read. The 3 that are in this book of Gurudev's, then Bhakti's, right? And then Srila Prabhupada's. Gaur Premanandi. Jai Shri Shri Upadesham Ritam Ki Jai, Shri Shri Rupa Goswami Pada Ki Jai, Shri Rupanuga Guru Varga Ki Jai, Sachinandan Gaur Hari Ki Jai, Shri Nityananda Prabhu Ki Jai, Shri Panchatattva Ki Jai, Samaveta Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai, Nitai Gaur Premanandi Hari Gaur. Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavibhyo. Govinda's here. Does she want to lead the arti?
I think she's there already.
She left?
Yeah.
Oh,
She had to.
okay.
No.
Then we have the default devotee.
The default.
Jai
Hare
Jai Guru Garanga Gandharvika Giridhari Jai Shri Radha Govinda Ki Jai Nityavila Pravishtam Vishnupada Satya Shri Srimad His Divine Grace A.C. Bhakti Vedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai Jai Nityavila Pravishtam Vishnupada Satya Shri Srimad Bhakti Vedanta Narayan Goswami Maharaj Ki Jai Jai Nityalila Pravishtam Vishnupada Tathar Satya Shri Srimad Bhakti Vedanta Vaman Goswami Maharaj Ki Jai Jai Nityalila Pravishtam Tathar Satya Shri Srimad Bhakti Pragyan Keshav Goswami Maharaj Ki Jai Nityalila Pravishtam Vishnupada Tathar Satya Shri Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Goswami Prabhupada Ki Jai Nityalila Pravishta Param Bhagavat Prabhar Shri Srila Gaur Kishore Das Babaji Maharaj Ki Jai Nityalila Pravishta Shri Srila Sachidananda Bhakti Vinod Thakur Ki Jai Nityalila Pravishta Vaishnav Sarvabhaum Shri Srila Jagannath Das Babaji Maharaj Ki Jai Shri Gurudev Vedanta Acharya Shri Srila Baladev Vidyabhushan Prabhu Ki Jai Srila